We're back with another episode of App Stories. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing really well. We've got this episode sponsored by our friends at Clean My Mac X, Details Pro, and Nom Nom. Federico, today we're going to talk a little bit about the OSs that are being updated this fall and how they're going to impact third-party apps. All right, Federico, let's dig into these apps and what's changing.
All right. So as you mentioned, there's a lot of ground to cover. And I also want to say that this is a classic App Stories episode.
It really is,
that
yes.
we do, that I think we do every year after WWDC. And it's not just about like the episode of, all right, let's take a look at what apps Apple Sherlocked this time. And I mean, there is an element of that, but it's also, I think, hopefully a little more interesting than that, because we take a look at the impact that these Apple updates will have on third-party apps, which is to say, I don't think any of these third-party apps are going away.
No.
And in fact, some of them maybe even may find a new audience, because this is usually what happens. When Apple enters a category, whether they make a new app or they add a specific feature to one of their existing apps, it raises awareness in the general public, right? Apple making a journaling app, or Apple adding internal links to notes, both topics we're going to discuss shortly. Doing that raises awareness in people in terms of, oh, now I know that this app exists or this feature exists. And maybe they start doing some Googling, maybe they talk to other people, maybe they hear it on a podcast and they discover, oh, but there's a whole other world of apps that do this and more on the App Store. And so that's usually how it goes. Apple raising the baseline, it's not necessarily a bad thing if we can drive people. Once you have a baseline of experience, but if you're the kind of person who wants a little bit more than what Apple offers, it can be a good thing for third-party apps.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I got to mention a very funny Sherlock story I read that said that the app Bump was being Sherlocked by the ability to trade contact information by bringing your iPhones, your phone and someone else's close together. And the reality is Apple's not Sherlocking Bump. Google took care of that. They bought Bump and they shut it down within about a year, like they do with everything else. And that happened years and years ago. I had actually forgotten that Bump even existed.
Me too.
What was that? Maybe like a 2013, 2014 era type of thing, maybe.
Yeah, right about that time, I would say.
Yeah, I would say so too. All right, well, let's dig into some of these changes that are coming with the OSs. Where do you want to start with this? Does journaling make sense, since that's a pretty big one?
That's a pretty big one. It's going to be a brand new, just like Freeform last year, brand new system app made by Apple. It's not right now in the iOS and iPadOS 17 betas.
No.
It's not here, and it will come out later this year. So we're going to talk about this first for just a few minutes, because I think it's going to be hard to judge, given that we don't have a practical example to test right now. Obviously, the first thing that comes to mind is, day one and other journaling apps are done. I don't think it's going to be that simple, especially because there's going to be an API for developers to offer up journaling activities, which in theory, a third-party journaling app could also integrate with. Obviously, the appeal of the Apple Journal app will be it's made by Apple, it's free, it's secure, it's private, you can trust Apple, and it's going to integrate with different sort of very like native aspects of the experience. Like, for example, your workouts or, the people you got in touch with on iMessage. That iMessage integration likely going to be one of the highlights of Journal, because I don't think any other third-party app can integrate with iMessage the way Journal will be able to. Integration with the Find Friends network, integration with music. Some of these integrations, other developers will probably be able to replicate. But if I were to bet, I'm pretty sure that Apple is going to use a lot of private APIs here for the sort of first-party built-in integrations that no other developer will be able to take advantage of. And so that's why I think it's exciting to see Apple enter this category, because my iPhone knows a lot of stuff about me, obviously. And to have like a subset of that data be parsed and presented nicely in a journal app that is free to use, secure, made by Apple, I think it's going to be very, very appealing for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think it'll bring a lot of new people into it because with those kind of integrations, it really reduces friction. It doesn't require you to necessarily even write anything to have kind of a view into your day, what you were listening to, where you went, who you chatted with, that kind of thing, which I find appealing. I do think, though, that I don't think that this is going to make a huge impact on existing apps only because I think people are very particular about their journaling apps. If you're really seriously into journaling, you've probably already found the app that works for you. Maybe it's day one, or maybe it's one of the many others that are out there. There are just a ton of these apps, and they have overlap in the features that they offer, and they'll certainly have some overlap with what Apple is going to offer as well. But I do feel like journaling being such a personal activity that a lot of existing users probably aren't going to switch. And then it's more a question of going forward to what degree can these third-party apps compete with Apple's. And I think, as you said, a lot of times these apps have much deeper features or more particular features than Apple is probably ever going to offer. So I think it'll be all right in the end.
Yeah, and the journal API will be interesting to see how it works. With this third-party apps, be able to offer up some suggestions, like will day one really be able to take advantage of the suggestions API and say, let's assume that Music Box integrates with the suggestions API so that it can log when I mark an album as played. Right? Makes sense. Something that it could do. Will day one be able to look into that activity and save into my day one diary that on that day Federico played the new album by I don't know, Block Party or something? In theory, yes. But again, we'll have to see. All of this is theoretical. We don't have the app to try right now. We can just go buy a couple of screenshots on the Apple website.
Right. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Clean My Mac X. Junk files, hung processes, and malicious apps can slow down even the latest, most powerful Macs. Maintaining your Apple machine, whether it's old or new, is essential to smooth macOS performance. Clean My Mac X is an all-in-one Mac maintenance tool that takes care of junk, faulty apps, and malware in an efficient, aesthetically pleasing, and hassle-free way. Using the app's menu bar app, you can monitor your Mac's health, CPU load, and a whole lot more too. With nearly 30 million downloads and 15 years of expertise, this app is a must-try for Mac users. Run Clean My Mac X to gear up your Mac for the groundbreaking additions announced at this year's WWDC. As Apple continues to pack Macs with innovative features, Clean My Mac X ensures that your hardware remains healthy and running at peak performance, so you can enjoy a seamless macOS experience. I've been using Clean My Mac X for years. I think it's been like 6 or 7 or 8, even 8 years at this point. And what I like about it is that it's an all-in-one tool. Not only does it let you get rid of junk files and big files that are clogging up your Mac, but it looks for malware. It can help you uninstall apps and tune the performance of your Mac too. It's all without leaving their single app. It's perfect for keeping your Mac up to date and running well. All App Stories listeners can get 5% off today. Just check out the link in the show notes now or go to macpod.app/appstories. Again, that URL is macpod.app/appstories, or use the link in the show notes below. Our thanks to Clean My Mac X for their support of App Stories.
All right, let's move on to notes. This is the big one. I also wrote about this in Mac Stories Weekly last Friday. I didn't think Apple would ever do it, but they did it in a very Apple-y kind of way. So now in iOS 17 and all the other OSs, you can add internal links to notes. So Apple calls it wiki-style linking, and they describe it as the ability to easily create a link to another note in the Notes app, whether you want to create like a wiki for your team or a trip itinerary, or you just want to create a table of contents, for example, if you're a student and you have different notes on the same topic and you want to bring them all together. And I think it's very nicely done, right? There's a new add link menu that sort of repurposes the existing Command K keyboard shortcut that has existed on the Mac for a long time. And there's even like a quick pop-up of sorts that lets you very quickly add a link to one of your recently modified notes. Now, obviously, is this a threat for apps like Craft and Obsidian or Rome? And I don't think it is necessarily. It's not a threat because, as you can imagine, the way that Apple does internal linking is like 10% of what Obsidian can do.
Right.
There's no backlinks, for example, meaning if I'm linking from Note A to Note B, in Obsidian, when I open Note B, I see in the backlinks view a little message that says, hey, Note A also links to you. Those are backlinks, and backlinks are not supported in Apple Notes. In Obsidian and in other similar apps, you can not only link to another note, but you can link to a section of a note or to a block of a note. And all of those fine-grained controls you don't have in Apple Notes. But that said, I do think it's more than good enough for a lot of people. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of folks who were using Craft or Obsidian or Notion before, because they really wanted to have internal links to notes, but maybe they thought that the rest of the experience was a little too much for them and maybe unnecessary. Maybe they're going to take a look at Notes and be like, you know what, this is probably enough for me. And I can probably switch back to Notes. And I'm going to have my basic internal links, and those are fine. Those are great for what I need.
Yeah, I think that Notes is going to be a really good solution for a subset of what people do on Obsidian because, and even for me personally, I find that my Obsidian vault gets a little crowded with a hodgepodge of things related to Mac stories and my personal life and other things. And some of that stuff is very much reference material. And I feel like I'd like to get some of the reference material out of Obsidian and into Notes where it's not like I don't view Notes as a text editor personally. It's a note-taking app. And Obsidian can be a note-taking app, but it also can be a text editor. And I think Notes is more than adequate for that kind of reference material, whether it's something like you said, I don't know, a database of information for your team or some family information like your finances or whatever it happens to be, projects you're doing. I think that will work really well in Notes with, linking to create like a little table of contents for a project you're working on and that kind of thing without having to get it combined and mixed in with a bunch of other things in Obsidian. So I'm planning to give that a try this summer. I haven't had a chance to do it yet, but I think there's a really good use case for it that'll satisfy an awful lot of experiences. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be leaving Obsidian either, because that's where I actually write, the articles that we publish, and I would never do that from Notes. So I think that there's room for both of them.
Yeah.
Federico, we should talk about Notes PDF.
Yeah, I saw
support.
You play around with that last week. You were playing around with that feature.
I was, and I wrote about it a little bit on Mac Stories. It's really, really well done. And I think one of the things that Apple does with kind of businessy needs is they find kind of the simple solution that a lot of people that people can get by with if it's just like for their personal use. And I'm thinking about things like scanning. You may run a business and go to the office and need to scan a lot of documents. And for that, you need, a dedicated scanner. But maybe when you go home at night, you're like, oh, you're signing a new lease for, an apartment, and you need to get that document into your phone, sign it, and send it to somebody, send it to the landlord or whatever. And that's the kind of thing, that kind of scanning solution that's already built into Notes that Apple does really well. You need it once in a while. You don't need it every day. And it's not for high volume work either, but it gets the job done. And I feel like that's very true of this PDF integration too. It looks to me like it's going to be a great solution for students, but also it's going to be good for anybody who, I don't know, maybe you want to have a place to store manuals for some of the appliances in your home or, your gadgets. And it allows you to annotate these things, sign documents, and take notes about them. So maybe then, that lease that you've scanned in, you sign it there, email it off to the landlord, and then you keep it in the note, and maybe you have a few notes at the bottom about what your rent is and what some of the restrictions are, so that you just have that in a handy place for reference for later. And I think that that's really what Notes is becoming very good at, is becoming a perfect place for those tidbits of information and reference materials that you need day to day, whether it's, for your work, but especially for your personal life.
Yeah, I agree.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Details Pro. Details Pro is a wonderful design tool for designers of Apple apps. It makes life easier for designers by building on the way SwiftUI made life easier for developers too. Their philosophy is that an all-visual interface makes SwiftUI accessible to everyone. Want to see if your design can work in SwiftUI? Use Details Pro to learn the basics like vertical stacks, SF symbols, and SwiftUI frame and padding in an easy, accessible environment. The app is faster than writing code to mock up designs and more accurate than Canvas design tools because everything is live SwiftUI. Details Pro uses real Apple HIG fonts, colors, and dark mode for an authentic design. Designers can use Details Pro to prove designs are possible and can export SwiftUI to Xcode or send their designs directly to developers. Recent features made from the ground up for Apple designers include the repeat feature, which makes it easy to design lists, rows, and the type of UI where you'd normally use symbols. Repeat has built-in capabilities for special use cases and changing content, so individual elements stay synced but can look different. There's also the grid feature, which brings SwiftUI grids to designers. Easily pick a number of rows and columns and pair it with Repeat to have a design that builds out with SwiftUI's grid layout. Details Pro is free forever for up to 5 files, and Details Pro is 50% off right now through the end of June to celebrate WWDC. Monthly, yearly, and one-time purchases are all discounted, so take a look at this deal today. Design from your Mac, iPad, or iPhone with full feature parity and iCloud sync across devices. Built-in SwiftUI templates are free and help you with beautiful SwiftUI starting points. Just go to detailspro.app today to learn more and download the app. Again, that URL is detailspro.app. Our thanks to Details Pro for their support of App Stories.
All right, let me talk about messages for a little bit.
There's a lot here, yeah.
Yeah. So first of all, the one thing that Apple sort of copied in messages this year is the gesture to reply to a message. So finally, you can reply on iMessage just like you can reply on WhatsApp, which is swipe to reply. And it's literally, I showed you last week, it's literally the same gesture. And I'm pretty sure like even the same animation, like you quickly swipe on a message and you enter reply mode. Finally, you no longer have to long press on a message, wait for the pop-up, and then press reply in the pop-up. Now you can just swipe and start typing, and it's perfect.
It's going to take me a while. It's going to take me a while to get used to this because I'm not in the habit of doing this. You probably are because you use WhatsApp with your friends, and I've had it available to me for the last week, and I haven't used it once.
Obviously, this is not going to have any impact on WhatsApp. It's not like people are going to switch from WhatsApp to iMessage because of this, but it sort of validates the implementation of WhatsApp from many years ago.
Right.
The impact on a third-party app, unfortunately, and I think this is the Sherlock
the
of
true
iOS
Sherlock,
17. The true Sherlock, the one true Sherlock of iOS 17 is stickers, and the Sherlock tab would be sticker drop. Now, not everything, but the core functionality and even more in the sense that there's something that sticker drop cannot do, which iOS 17 can now do natively inside messages, inside photos, and everything is built in. You can turn any subject from any photo into a sticker, and it goes right there in the iMessage stickers view, and you can now use it everywhere. because stickers are now available from the keyboard, and you can do animated stickers. You can do stickers with effects. Apple just took a look at Sticker Drop and thought, we can take all of that and do it better. And obviously, Apple being Apple, you don't have any manual controls in terms of how you want to draw the shape of a sticker or sort of those manual creation tools. But I think it's more than good enough, and it's free, and it works with live photos. It works with all kinds of images. And once you save a sticker, it syncs with your devices, and you can find it everywhere, and you can use it in messages, in mail, whatever you want. Poor Sticker Drop.
Yeah. I have a really good collection of stickers too in Sticker Drop, so I'll probably keep using it for those. But given that it's system wide, I think that's the thing that will really cause people to switch over to this if they were already using Sticker Drop. But all right, I want to skip down our list a little bit, Federico, and talk to you about Safari, because I feel like I feel like Apple took a look at some of the innovations and things like the Arc browser and decided, you know what, we can do that, and we can do it in kind of a Safari way, which is profiles. Profiles is a very good idea that Arc really pioneered, where you can have profiles for, say, home and work. Which what that does is when you're in that particular profile, you have a separate set of cookies, a separate set of favorites and history, and all those things, which really works well for that kind of modality where, you don't need all the logins and everything for your work when you're at home, and vice versa when you're at work. So our lives are such that I don't think that you and I are probably going to use this, but maybe, I don't know. I mean, I think I would have really liked this back in the day when I was working in an office and I left for the day, and I didn't want to kind of mix up my browsing history and my favorites and all those things with what I was doing at work.
Yeah, I'm not going to have a use for this, but obviously a lot of people do, whether it's because you work in an office and you want to have a separate set of cookies and logins, and just about anything in a browser, you want to keep it separate. Students, I think personally, I'm the kind of user who occasionally I can use tab groups to keep my like topics separate, but I don't really have a need for profiles. That said, I do agree. Like this is a feature that Arc really popularized, and now you can find it in Safari.
Yeah, the only place I could see maybe using this for someone like you or I would be maybe you could have a separate profile for your Gmail, your work versus your personal Gmail, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I keep it all the same.
I kind of do too. I don't know. I was thinking about it. I haven't played around it all that much yet. The other thing that's coming in Safari is password sharing, which is one of the reasons I think a lot of people have pointed out that they've stayed with 1Password even after, Apple has implemented a lot of really nice password management features in Safari. Now you'll be able to share with trusted, friends, family, whomever it happens to be. And, you and I do that. We have various Mac Stories logins for different services that we use to run the business. And we share those passwords between the two of us. And we've used 1Password for that for a long time. And we don't have an overwhelming number of these. I haven't looked, but we probably don't have more than 20 or 30 different passwords. We could probably use this.
I think so too, especially because the feature is really well done. Like,
it is nice.
I was taking a look in settings, and you can create different groups of shareable items. So like we could have a Mac Stories group, or I could have a family group with Sylvia. I could have a family group with my entire family for things like my well, I'm not supposed to say my Netflix login and my Disney login, but hey, that's what people do. And yeah, I mean, realistically, it still makes me feel a bit uneasy to move. I've been using 1Password for 14 years.
Yeah.
Since I really started using make it 15, because I got my first Mac in 2008. So I've been using it for 15 years, and it makes me feel a bit, uncomfortable to say, well, I'm going to stop using 1Password and just use the Apple Keychain, which is not even an app. It's a page in settings. But at the same time, all the features I want are kind of there.
Yeah.
And it's going to be more integrated with 1Password anyway, resulting in a nicer experience all around when I use my devices. So yeah, I'm thinking about it.
I think I'm definitely going to do it. I've actually been preparing for this day for a couple of years, basically using 1Password and Apple's system side by side. And slowly, the thing about my 1Password is because I've had it so long, there's a lot of dead stuff in there that I really should clean out. Right. Services you just don't use anymore, or passwords that got changed but didn't get updated in the app for whatever reason. There's just a lot of cruft in there. And yes, I could be one of those people who goes in and spends, several hours on a weekend pruning my 1Password library, but that seems like a very big waste of time to me because it's so easy to find what you need with search anyway. But after having used the two side by side for a couple of years, I feel like the Safari list that I've got is far more accurate and timely these days, and that it would be pretty easy for me to just kind of scan through 1Password and flip the switch and move over entirely. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Nom Nom. Don't settle when it comes to your pup's health. Make the switch to fresh food made with real ingredients and backed by science. That's Nom Nom. Nom Nom delivers fresh dog food with every portion personalized to your dog's needs, so you can bring out the best. Nom Nom's made with real whole food you can see and recognize without any additives or fillers that contribute to bloating and low energy. That's because Nom Nom uses the latest science and insights to make real good food for dogs. Their nutrient-packed recipes are crafted by board-certified veterinary nutritionists, made fresh and shipped free to your door. Nom Nom's already delivered over 40 million meals to good dogs like yours, inspiring millions of clean bowls and tail wags. Nom Nom sent me some of their meals for dogs, and I gave it to my brother because he's got 3 rescue dogs that he takes care of, and they absolutely loved it. They gobbled these meals down right away. And the best thing about it is knowing that when you give one of the Nom Nom meals to your dog or someone else's dog, that it's going to be good for them. It's full of nutrition and exactly what they need to keep them healthy and happy. Plus, ordering Nom Nom for the first time is a no-brainer because it comes with a money-back guarantee. If your dog's tail isn't wagging within 30 days, Nom Nom will refund your first order. No fillers, no nonsense, just Nom Nom. Go right now for 50% off your no-risk 2-week trial at trynom.com/appstories. That's nom.com/appstories for 50% off your first order. trynom.com/appstories. Our thanks to Nom Nom for their support of the show. All right, Federico, we should talk about game mode and some of the stuff that's coming to the Mac for gaming. And you know me, I am an eternal optimist when it comes to gaming on the Mac. Very frustrated as a result.
You and Apple really want to make this happen.
I kind of do. And I don't get my hopes up very high anymore these days, but Apple keeps, pushing this rock up the hill every single year with new technologies, new initiatives, and I kind of feel pretty good about what we saw this year. And there's this new technology, this new toolkit for porting games over to the Mac that we can talk about in more detail at some other point in the future. But I think it's one of the most practical things I've seen Apple do with gaming in a long time, which is let's not just sit around and hope that developers are going to start using our APIs. Let's give them a way that they can actually bring their Windows games directly to the Mac and create a compatibility layer, very much like Valve did with the Steam Deck, so that they just work, or they just work with a few tweaks here and there. And that's one thing that's coming. But there's also game mode. And I think game mode is kind of interesting. It does things like it's reducing the latency for third-party controllers while you're playing, as well as the latency if you're using AirPods Pro. And it's little things like that at the edges that I think make gaming more possible on the Mac than ever before. And this isn't really a case of Sherlocking anything. This is just opening up the Mac to a wider audience, different kinds of games that haven't been on there historically. And I'm thinking, primarily the AAA titles that we're starting to see creep onto the platform a little more than in the past, whether you're downloading them from Steam because they were made for the Mac in the first place, whether they came to the Mac App Store, or eventually whether they're being played, they're Windows games that are actually being played in some sort of compatibility mode starting next fall.
All right, so hear me out. Imagine this sort of setup. A Mac Mini, right? Imagine a Mac Mini, like a Mac Mini. Then, hold on. So you get a Mac Mini, and you get like a 5-meter HDMI cable.
Yeah.
Then imagine getting like a small, like 8-inch, 9-inch display that has HDMI in.
Yep.
Then imagine 3D printing a Joy-Con holder for this tiny display. Basically, I'm thinking about like a makeshift Nintendo Switch, which is actually a display with 2 Joy-Cons, one on each side, running Mac games. So like you keep a Mac Mini somewhere, and then, you run a long HDMI cable, and you sit on a chair, or you just chill on the couch.
That's fascinating.
And you could probably do it. You could probably do it, and somebody will, I'm sure. Now that there's we're seeing now there's a lot of interest around this new emulation tool for porting this what's it called, game porting toolkit, and support for DirectX 12. There's a lot of interest right now in porting these Windows games to macOS, and I think somebody will do this. You can probably get one of those like standalone touchscreen displays that can pass input to a computer. So if you touch the screen, the computer actually receives the input. And I mean, then you just got to figure out how to pair a game controller with the Mac, which is something that you can do. And realistically, you can make a tiny custom, quote unquote, Steam Deck or Nintendo Switch for your Mac gaming needs.
I like that. I like the way you think.
It's a bit of a project, but
it is. But really, what you're saying is you could use something like a smaller version of the C-Force display that you and I love so much. That would work.
Yeah.
Right?
That would work. Yes.
I don't know. Maybe they make a 7 or 8 or 9-inch model. I don't know. I mean, that's now you've given me a research project. That sounds. And I do think, yes, you have a research project now. I do feel like, in terms of impact on third-party apps, I do feel like this summer we're gonna start seeing a lot of these like one-click tools to take a Windows game and imagine like an installer of sorts, like a one-click installer for taking a Windows game and making it run on a Mac. Because right now you got to do it all yourself, right? It's a developer tool. So you got to take the game, you got to, sign it, whatever. But I think we're going to start seeing a lot of this, like, okay, you just take your Windows game, you drop it into a thing, and now you have a Mac game. And we're also going to start seeing websites and YouTube creators who write and talk about this topic specifically. Because like in the past week alone, these experiments are popping up everywhere. Whether it used to be only Cyberpunk, and now it's like a bunch of PC games running on macOS. Yeah, no, we've definitely seen a lot of that in a very short time. There's a really great article that Christina Warren did for Inverse that I linked to on Mac Stories that I'll put in the show notes that gives you an idea of what this is all about. I also, I found myself yesterday comparing all the different M2 Macs side by side and trying to figure out which one is the ideal bang for the buck for gaming on the Mac come this fall. And I don't think that question has really been answered by anybody yet. I don't know if the MacBook Air is too underpowered in terms of the memory and the number of cores. or if the M2 Ultra, Mac Studio is overkill. Somewhere along that product spectrum, there is the ideal Mac for gaming. And I think with the M2, from the little that I have seen, they do perform pretty well. So I think that there's definitely potential here.
All right. And before we wrap up, I feel like we need to mention widgets, because this is the year of widgets everywhere. You have widgets on the Mac, which John has been playing around with. You have widgets on the iPad lock screen. You have widgets in standby. You have interactive widgets on the home screen of your iPhone, iPad, and the Mac desktop. Developers of widgets and widget-enabled apps are going to be busy this summer. And I think in September, we're going to see not only like standby specific optimized widgets, but we're going to see a lot of existing widgets from our favorite apps be rethought for interactivity. Mm-hmm. This is something that you can already see with the built-in apps on iOS, like reminders. Now it's an interactive widget. It's still the same one from before, but now you can actually check off the reminder from your home screen. And I think and we're seeing an example of like Joe Ribar, the developer of Timery, has already like a proof of concept of starting a timer from an interactive widget on your home screen. I think the impact here is pretty obvious. A lot of developers that wanted to have interactivity in their widgets but couldn't before, now they're going to do it the native way. And so be ready for, like in September, all of your favorite apps will have two things: standby widgets and interactive widgets, and it's going to be great.
Right. And I think one aspect of interactivity that is going to fundamentally change some of the widgets we've seen is the ability to have buttons means that a widget could have multiple views now. You might have a weather widget that lets you flip between today's conditions, a week view, and maybe radar or something like that. I think there's a lot of room here to actually make widgets deeper experiences than they are at the moment. All right, Federico, it's a good conversation. I think we'll probably have more on this. There's a few more categories that we haven't talked about. And at some point, I really want to pick your brain about what you think we're going to see with Vision Pro in terms of what that means for third-party apps and what kinds of third-party apps will be good for that. That's probably a topic for an entire episode at some point in the near future. I want to thank our three sponsors again. That's Clean My Mac X, Details Pro, and NomNom. You can find me and Federico over at macstories.net. We're both on Mastodon too. Federico, just go to vitici.macstories.net to follow him, or johnvorhees.macstories.net to follow me. And we're on Instagram, where Federico is at Vitici. That's VITICCI, and I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.